On January 7, 1944, German pilot Werner Schröer, an experienced Luftwaffe ace with 114 confirmed victories, took off from his base in France to intercept an approaching formation of American fighters. When he spotted the unmistakable silhouette of several P-38 Lightnings cutting through the European sky, his reaction was not his usual confidence. It was calculated caution and forced respect. The Lightning, with its twin Allison V-1710 engines roaring at 1,475 horsepower each, represented something few German pilots were prepared to face, a war machine that challenged all conventions of aerial combat. Schröer knew he was facing an aircraft that the Germans themselves had nicknamed der Gabelschwanz Teufel, the fork-tailed devil. But what truly terrorized veteran pilots like him wasn't just the twin engines or intimidating appearance. It was the gradual realization that the P-38 represented a complete revolution in aerial combat philosophy, a machine that made decades of German tactics and strategies obsolete. In that moment, as he maneuvered for attack position, Schröer didn't know he was witnessing the future of aerial warfare, where American technological superiority was about to completely redefine the rules of the game in European skies. The first time Major Heinz Baer, another German ace with 220 victories, faced a P-38 over Germany in 1943, he described the experience as fighting a ghost that could be in two places at once. The Lightning flew at speeds that defied physics known to German pilots, 44 in level flight, a speed that rendered traditional interception tactics useless. While German fighters like the Messerschmitt Bf 109G struggled to reach 386 mt highs, the P-38 simply accelerated and disappeared over the horizon, leaving Luftwaffe pilots frustrated and disoriented. But speed was only the beginning of the nightmare. The Lightning carried a concentrated arsenal in the nose that included a 20mm Hispano cannon and 4 50-caliber machine guns, all firing through the propeller without need for synchronization. This meant every shot was deadly. There were no stray bullets or dispersion caused by firing through propeller blades. When a P-38 opened fire, it was like a spear of fire piercing the air, concentrated and lethal. German pilots quickly realized that their close combat tactics, developed against conventional fighters, were suicidal against the Lightning. The American machine not only outperformed their fighters in speed and firepower, but also in operational range, capable of flying more than 300 miles without refueling, a capability that allowed deep escorts into enemy territory. What truly terrorized German pilots was the incomprehensible versatility of the P-38. In a single mission, the same aircraft that escorted bombers at 25,000 feet could descend to attack ground targets with surgical precision, carry 2,000-pound bombs for bombing missions, or conduct high-speed photographic reconnaissance. Oberst Adolf Galland, general of fighters for the Luftwaffe, confessed in his reports that the P-38 represented a multidimensional threat that our pilots cannot categorize or combat effectively. The twin-engine configuration wasn't just about power, it was a survival guarantee that psychologically terrorized the Germans. While a conventional single-engine fighter was doomed if hit in the engine, the P-38 could continue flying and fighting with only one engine functioning. German pilots reported the frustration of scoring direct hits on a Lightning, only to see it continue flying and returning fire. Hauptmann Georg Peter Eder, with 78 victories, wrote in his diary, "It's like fighting a two-headed dragon. You cut off one head, and the other keeps spitting fire." This ability to absorb damage and remain operational created a devastating psychological advantage, where German pilots began each combat knowing that even direct hits might not be enough to bring down the enemy. In the Pacific, Japanese pilots' reaction to the P-38 was even more dramatic. Lieutenant Colonel Saburo Sakai, the most famous Japanese ace with 64 confirmed victories, had his first encounter with Lightnings over Guadalcanal in August 1942. Sakai, who had dominated Pacific skies for months in his Mitsubishi A6M0, described the moment as the end of our air supremacy. The Zero, with its legendary agility and superior maneuverability, had been invincible against all Allied fighters until that moment. But the P-38 didn't try to outmaneuver the Zero in traditional dogfighting. It simply used its superior speed of 44 against the Zero's 331 RB to dictate combat terms. Japanese pilots, trained for close combat and aerobatic maneuvers, discovered their tactics were useless against an aircraft that could attack at high speed and escape before they could react. Sakai reported, "They appeared from nowhere, fired with deadly precision, and disappeared before we could turn to pursue them. It was like fighting lightning bolts. The frustration was palpable in Japanese reports. Experienced pilots who had dominated the Pacific for years now felt powerless against a machine that completely redefined aerial combat rules. The operation that most terrorized the Japanese was the interception of Admiral Yamamoto on April 18, 1943. 16 P-38 Lightnings from the 339th Fighter Squadron took off from Henderson Field in Guadalcanal for a mission that seemed impossible. Fly 435 miles over enemy territory, intercept Yamamoto's personal aircraft with minute precision, and return to base. What made this mission terrifying for the Japanese wasn't just the assassination of their supreme commander, but the brutal demonstration of the P-38's range and precision capabilities. No other Allied aircraft could have executed this mission. The Lightning's 300-mile operational range was fundamental to reaching targets so deep in enemy territory. Captain Thomas Lanphier Jr. and Lieutenant Rex Barber, flying their P-38s, intercepted the two Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers carrying Yamamoto exactly at the predicted time. The operation's precision, calculated to the minute and executed perfectly hundreds of miles from base, demonstrated an operational capability that the Japanese couldn't understand or replicate. When news of Yamamoto's death spread, it wasn't just the leader's loss that shook Japanese morale, but the realization that the Americans possessed a weapon that could strike any target, anywhere, at any time. The psychological terror of the P-38 intensified due to its ability to appear where least expected. Unlike conventional fighters operating within limited radii, the Lightning could escort bombers to Berlin, attack targets in Romania, and still return to base in Italy, a capability that left German defenders in constant alert. Major Erich Hartmann, history's greatest ace with 352 victories, admitted that the P-38 was the only American fighter we truly respected and feared. Hartmann developed specific tactics to avoid direct combat with Lightnings, preferring to attack only when he had overwhelming numerical advantage or guaranteed superior position. The P-38's unique configuration, with the cockpit centered between engines, offered the pilot 360-degree visibility that made ambushes nearly impossible. German pilots reported the frustration of attempting stealthy approaches, only to discover the Lightning pilot had already detected them and was maneuvering for attack position. Hauptmann Walter Krupinski, with 197 victories, wrote in his memoirs, "Fighting a P-38 was like boxing an opponent with eyes in the back of his head. You could never surprise him, but he always knew where you were." This situational awareness advantage, combined with superior speed, created a combat environment where German pilots felt constantly disadvantaged, even when technically superior in numbers. The mass production of the P-38 represented another terrifying aspect for Axis pilots. While Germany and Japan struggled with material shortages and production limitations, Lockheed produced 10,037 Lightning units between 1941 and 1945. For German pilots accustomed to facing limited numbers of Allied fighters, the sight of formations of 50 or 100 P-38s escorting bombers was psychologically devastating. Oberst Johannes Steinhoff, commander of JG-77, reported that his pilots began developing lightning angst, a specific fear that affected their combat performance. When our pilots saw those twin silhouettes on the horizon, many already began looking for escape routes before combat even started, Steinhoff wrote in his reports. American industrial capability, represented by massive P-38 production, demonstrated a reality many Axis pilots were reluctant to accept. They weren't just fighting superior aircraft, but an industrial war machine that could produce these aircraft in unimaginable quantities. Each downed Lightning was quickly replaced by two new ones, while each lost German or Japanese pilot represented years of training and experience that couldn't be easily replaced. The P-38's impact on enemy pilot morale was amplified by its presence in all theaters of operation simultaneously. While German pilots faced Lightnings over Europe, their Japanese colleagues reported identical encounters in the Pacific, creating a sense of omnipresence that was psychologically overwhelming. Major Richard Bong, America's top ace with 40 victories all in P-38s, became a terrifying legend among Japanese pilots. When Bong appeared in Pacific skies, experienced Japanese pilots often chose to avoid combat, recognizing that facing a skilled pilot in a P-38 was almost certainly fatal. Lieutenant Hiroyoshi Nishizawa, one of Japan's best pilots, confessed that fighting a Lightning piloted by an experienced American was like facing a samurai with a bamboo sword. The combination of technological superiority with well-trained pilots created a synergy that Axis pilots simply couldn't match. Japanese intelligence reports from the period reveal growing concern about the lightning effect, the tendency of Japanese pilots to avoid combat when P-38s were present, even when they had numerical advantage. The P-38's versatility in ground attack missions added another dimension to the terror it inspired. Equipped with 5-inch rockets or bombs up to 2,000 pounds, the Lightning could devastate ground targets with the same efficiency it dominated aerial combat. German commanders reported that airfields, fuel depots, and industrial installations were constantly under threat from P-38 attacks, which appeared at high speed, struck with precision, and escaped before defenses could react effectively. General der Flieger Adolf Galland wrote in his memoirs, "The P-38 wasn't just a fighter, it was a strategic weapon that could alter the course of an entire campaign." The ability to instantly transition between aerial combat and ground attack meant no German or Japanese target was truly safe. Axis transport pilots, bomber crews, and reconnaissance aircraft developed a particular fear of the Lightning, knowing its superior speed made escape nearly impossible. Hauptmann Heinrich Ehrler, commander of JG-5, instructed his pilots, "If you see P-38s, don't think about heroism, think about survival." This defensive mentality, imposed by Lightning superiority, represented a fundamental change in Axis pilot combat psychology, transforming them from confident hunters into cautious prey. The climax of terror inspired by the P-38 came during the Great Air Offensives of 1944, when hundreds of Lightnings escorted massive bomber formations to the heart of Germany and Japan. For German pilots defending Berlin or Japanese pilots protecting Tokyo, the sight of endless P-38 formations represented not just a tactical threat, but an overwhelming demonstration of American industrial and technological superiority. Oberst Hannes Trautloft, Luftwaffe veteran, described the moment he realized the war was lost. "When I saw 200 P-38s escorting 1,000 bombers over Berlin, I knew we were no longer fighting pilots. We were fighting an industrial machine that had made our resistance irrelevant." The P-38's ability to maintain air superiority over enemy territory for hours, protecting bombers while simultaneously hunting defensive fighters, demonstrated an evolution in aerial warfare that made all previous tactics and strategies obsolete. Japanese pilots reported similar experiences during attacks on industrial cities, where P-38s based in Iwo Jima and Okinawa could escort B-29s to Japan and still have enough fuel for prolonged combat. This unprecedented operational capability created a sense of inevitability that fundamentally undermined Axis pilot morale and resistance. The lasting legacy of the P-38 Lightning transcended its effectiveness as a weapon of war to become a symbol of the technological transformation that redefined modern aerial conflict. For German and Japanese pilots who survived the war, the Lightning remained the embodiment of a historical moment when technological and industrial superiority determined the outcome of a global conflict. The terror it inspired wasn't just fear of a specific machine, but recognition that it represented a new era in aerial warfare, an era where technological innovation, industrial capacity, and superior training could overcome tradition, experience, and individual courage. Decades after the war's end, German and Japanese veterans still described the P-38 with a mixture of respect and apprehension, recognizing they had faced not just a superior aircraft but a symbol of the technological revolution that would shape all future conflicts. The Lightning proved that modern aerial warfare would be decided not only by pilot skill, but by nations' ability to design, produce, and deploy superior technology on an industrial scale. As German ace Adolf Galland said years after the war, the P-38 didn't just defeat us in the skies, it taught us that the future belonged to those who could combine technological innovation with unlimited industrial power.